Yeah, it was 1997, and I had just moved to Nashville and living on a prayer, and I had sung solo for about 9 years before that.
Just the headline alone, David Phelps' shocking revelation that left the gospel world in tears, carries the weight of crisis, confession, and collapse all at once. Yet in reality, it reflects something far more modern and far more unsettling than any single event. For David Phelps, a gospel tenor known for soaring vocal precision and a long-standing association with the Gaither Vocal Band, the shock lies in the way digital storytelling systems now manufacture emotional narratives around real public figures. Let's start from the very beginning. The making of a gospel singer. In the late 1990s, in a world where gospel music was still dominated by tightly harmonized quartets and traditional Southern church arrangements, a young American tenor began carving out a very different space for himself. David Phelps emerged with an almost classical command of the human voice that could climb into operatic territory while still anchored in evangelical hymnody. Born in Texas and trained in vocal performance, he entered the gospel circuit at a time when most tenors were valued for warmth and blend. He was noticed for something rarer, sheer vocal range that seemed to stretch beyond genre limits. By the early 2000s, that vocal identity placed him into one of the most influential groups in modern gospel music history, the Gaither Vocal Band. Founded by Bill Gaither and rooted in the Southern gospel tradition of Indiana-based homecoming tours, the group had already become a touring institution, performing across churches, arenas, and televised homecoming events that regularly reached national audiences in the United States. When Phelps joined, his tenor voice introduced a sharper, more operatic edge. He became a defining sonic element. Songs were often built around his climactic high notes, which could soar above layered harmonies and orchestral backing tracks. In live recordings from the early to mid-2000s, particularly during large-scale Gaither homecoming concerts, audiences often witnessed arrangements designed specifically to showcase his upper register. His performances of hymns and revival-style gospel pieces transformed familiar material into something closer to a staged vocal crescendo, blurring the line between church worship and concert hall performance. The group's touring model, covering multiple cities across the U.S., Canada, and international gospel festivals, amplified his visibility across a global Christian audience. While his group identity solidified his reputation, the parallel development of his solo career revealed a different dimension of his artistry. Albums such as Life is a Church and Freedom marked a deliberate shift away from purely ensemble-based gospel toward orchestral and cinematic arrangements. These projects incorporated full string sections, layered piano composition, and studio production techniques that leaned closer to Broadway or classical crossover music than traditional Southern gospel. This positioned him within a rare category of gospel artists capable of moving between worship music and concert-style classical vocal performance without losing audience coherence. By the mid-2010s, after more than a decade of extensive touring schedules that often involved dozens of annual performances, a major transition occurred. Gaither Vocal Band departure. In 2017, David Phelps stepped away from the Gaither Vocal Band after years of high-intensity touring, studio recording, and televised performances that had defined much of his professional identity since the early 2000s. At the time of his exit, the Gaither Vocal Band was not a small touring act, but a deeply established structure within the Southern gospel ecosystem. Founded by Bill Gaither in the late 1980s and headquartered within the broader Gaither music framework in Indiana, the group had evolved into a multimedia operation, producing homecoming concerts, television specials, and international tours that routinely featured packed venues across the United States and abroad. Within this system, Phelps had functioned as a signature tenor voice for more than a decade, often anchoring climactic moments in arrangements that were engineered around vocal peaks and harmonic layering. The mechanics of gospel touring during this period were demanding in ways that are often invisible to audiences. Annual schedules frequently involved extended runs of consecutive performances across multiple states, combined with recording sessions and televised tapings. For a vocalist like Phelps, whose repertoire relied heavily on sustained upper register performance, the physical and vocal strain of such a cycle was cumulative. Industry observers have long noted that tenors in this style of music face unique pressures. Their most recognizable vocal output is also the most physically taxing to maintain consistently across years of touring. By the mid-2010s, subtle changes in his professional rhythm began to appear. His participation in touring cycles became increasingly selective. In gospel music circles, such adjustments are not unusual and are often interpreted as logistical balancing rather than structural change. However, by 2017, the transition became formalized when Phelps stepped away from full-time membership in the group. But there was no scandal, unlike many online rumors. The official explanation centered on family priorities and the need to reduce the intensity of travel. In interviews and public-facing statements from that period, the emphasis remained on balance rather than departure from artistic collaboration. Despite this, the transition quickly became subject to reinterpretation in online spaces. Within months and years following his departure, social media narratives began reframing the event using more dramatic language. Terms like fallout, secret conflict, or scandal exit began appearing in YouTube titles and algorithm-driven video content. These narratives, however, were not supported by verifiable interviews, official statements, or reporting from established gospel music publications. Instead, they reflected a broader trend in digital media where personnel changes in well-known groups are recast as hidden controversies to increase engagement. The Gaither Vocal Band itself continued its operations without interruption. Phelps shifted more deliberately towards solo work, a move that had already been developing alongside his group responsibilities. His prior solo albums had demonstrated a distinct artistic direction, leaning toward orchestral arrangements, cinematic production, and classical crossover influences. Freed from the touring obligations of a large ensemble, he was able to prioritize performances and recordings that aligned more closely with this stylistic range. But the rumors and hoaxes did not end here. Death and imprisonment hoaxes. In the quieter corners of social media, where gospel music fans typically expect testimonies, concert clips, and worship performances, a different kind of narrative began to surface around David Phelps. Unlike traditional controversies tied to public statements or career decisions, this one emerged from a newer digital phenomenon: AI-generated misinformation packaged as emotional storytelling. Over time, these videos began to circulate across Facebook, YouTube, and short-form content platforms. The earliest wave of these hoaxes followed a familiar structure seen across multiple celebrity-targeted misinformation campaigns. In Phelps's case, the content often opened with dramatic framing, claims that a beloved gospel legend had suddenly died or suffered a severe medical emergency. These videos rarely used verified footage or official sources. As the pattern expanded, the hoaxes diversified beyond death narratives into imprisonment and personal scandal storylines. Some videos falsely claimed that Phelps had been arrested, while others suggested sudden marital breakdowns or permanent withdrawal from public life. In each case, the structure remained consistent: a hook suggesting tragedy, followed by emotionally charged storytelling, and ending with vague or fabricated confirmation. None of these claims were supported by court records, verified reporting, or statements from his representatives. What made these narratives particularly persistent was their reliance on partial truths. Phelps' real career naturally includes periods of reduced touring, private family time, and selective performances. In digital environments, these normal patterns of an established vocalist's schedule were reframed as evidence of crisis. The absence of frequent media appearances became interpreted as a disappearance. This gap between public visibility and algorithmic storytelling allowed misinformation to thrive, especially in spaces where viewers are more likely to encounter content through recommendation feeds than direct search. As if this was not enough, the gospel singer has often been confused with other people having the same name. The David Phelps workplace scandal. Important clarification. In the early 2010s, long before social media algorithms began reshaping how public narratives were built and broken, a completely different figure named David Phelps entered the political news cycle in Kentucky. The event would later become one of the most persistent sources of confusion for fans searching for information about David Phelps, not because of anything he did, but because of how easily digital identity collapses when multiple public figures share the same name. The actual political incident did not involve the gospel singer at all. It centered on a former U.S. congressman and Illinois politician, David Dwayne Phelps, a Democrat from Harrisburg, Illinois, whose government career came under scrutiny after an ethics-related workplace investigation connected to the Illinois Department of Transportation, commonly known as IDOT. After serving in Congress from 1999 to 2003, the politician David Phelps transitioned into state government work following his electoral loss to Republican Congressman John Shimkus during the post-2000 census redistricting shakeup. He later secured a high-ranking administrative role at IDOT under former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich. By 2011, he was earning approximately $127,700 annually as an assistant director within the agency, a powerful bureaucratic position overseeing operations and personnel. The situation escalated when an unfolding ethics probe began examining allegations involving one of Phelps's deputies, Danny Clayton, alongside several employees and a contractor connected to the department. Investigators focused on accusations involving improper workplace conduct, misuse of authority, and administrative irregularities tied to agency operations. Although the probe initially centered on Clayton, investigators soon widened their scrutiny to management oversight and internal conduct culture inside the department itself. As pressure mounted in 2011, Phelps resigned from his position before the full investigation concluded publicly. His resignation effectively ended his state employment and removed him from direct administrative authority inside the Transportation Department. While the departure itself did not involve criminal charges against him personally, it became part of a larger ethics scandal surrounding IDOT management practices during that era. The most serious professional consequence arrived 2 years later. In April 2013, the Illinois Office of Executive Inspector General released findings concluding that David Phelps should be barred from future state employment because of his conduct while serving in the department. That recommendation carried enormous reputational weight. In practical terms, it meant investigators believed his behavior violated standards serious enough to disqualify him from future work in Illinois government agencies. Importantly, this was not a criminal prosecution in the traditional sense. There were no public felony indictments, prison sentences, or courtroom convictions tied directly to the politician David Phelps himself. Instead, the repercussions were administrative and ethical: resignation from office, damage to political credibility, and recommendations restricting future state employment opportunities. The distinction matters because later online retellings often exaggerated the event into a criminal arrest scandal, even though verified reporting does not support those claims. The environment surrounding Midwestern state politics during this period helps explain why the case gained so much attention. The late 2000s and early 2010s were marked by heightened scrutiny of public ethics in Illinois government following a series of corruption scandals connected to figures like Governor Rod Blagojevich, who himself was impeached in 2009 and later convicted on federal corruption charges. In that climate, even administrative misconduct investigations attracted outsized media attention because public trust in government institutions had already been severely damaged. That atmosphere created ideal conditions for confusion years later, especially online. Search engines began collapsing multiple David Phelps identities into one searchable narrative. The gospel singer and the politician shared nothing except a name. Yet algorithmic systems frequently ignored such distinctions. One was performing worship concerts with the Gaither Vocal Band, while the other was navigating an ethics controversy tied to Illinois Transportation Administration. As misinformation ecosystems expanded on YouTube and Facebook during the 2020s, this confusion worsened dramatically. Misinformation and clickbait videos began recycling fragments of the politician's ethics investigation alongside footage of the gospel singer, implying that the musician himself had been involved in a scandal. The reputational distortion became even more severe because emotional storytelling formats reward ambiguity. Viewers encountering phrases like David Phelps scandal or David Phelps resignation were rarely given enough factual separation to understand they were dealing with entirely different individuals. Factually, the record remains clear. From a media literacy perspective, this pattern illustrates a structural problem in how digital information systems handle disambiguation. Traditional journalism separates identity through context, occupation, geography, and timeline. Algorithmic systems, by contrast, prioritize keyword relevance and engagement signals. As a result, David Phelps becomes less a specific individual and more a floating label attached to multiple unrelated events across different domains. As if this were not enough, it happened again and then again. Mistaken for a criminal twice. This needs to stop. One of the most damaging examples of digital identity confusion involving the name David Phelps emerged in Louisville, Kentucky, in 2016, when local authorities arrested a man of the same name as the gospel singer in an online solicitation investigation. The Louisville case unfolded during a period when law enforcement agencies across the United States were dramatically increasing undercover internet sting operations targeting online predators. By the mid-2010s, local police departments and state cybercrime units had begun using fake social media profiles, chat room monitoring, and decoy messaging operations to identify adults allegedly attempting to communicate sexually with minors online. Kentucky agencies participated heavily in these operations, especially around Louisville and Jefferson County, where internet crimes against children investigations had become a growing priority. In this environment, a Louisville area man named David Phelps was arrested after investigators alleged that he attempted to solicit underage individuals. Reports from the time described the case as part of broader cybercrime enforcement efforts targeting internet-based exploitation. The arrest entered local criminal reporting systems, jail databases, and searchable news archives under the plain name David Phelps, without any contextual distinction separating him from other public figures who shared that name. That detail seems minor at first, but in the digital era, it became critical. Once court and arrest records are indexed into search engines, aggregation systems, and automated content scrapers, names become searchable commodities detached from context. Search algorithms often prioritize keyword matching over identity verification. So when users typed David Phelps arrested or David Phelps scandal, the system did not reliably distinguish between a Kentucky criminal defendant and the gospel tenor associated with the Gaither Vocal Band. Initially, the confusion was limited mostly to scattered search results and forum posts, but then came the clickbait videos. Then it happened again. This next example involves a completely different David Phelps, connected to one of Nebraska's most haunting unsolved disappearance cases. A case so disturbing, it drew national media attention, 60 Minutes coverage, and decades of legal controversy. The case centered on the 1987 disappearance of Jill Cutshall from Norfolk, Nebraska. On August 13th of that year, she vanished under mysterious circumstances, triggering an intense search operation and widespread public fear. Her body was never found. The case quickly evolved into one of Nebraska's most infamous missing person investigations, generating national headlines during an era when child abduction fears were dominating American media coverage. 17 months after Cutshall disappeared, authorities focused attention on a 24-year-old man named David Phelps, who had previously lived in the same apartment complex as the girl's family. This David Phelps is not the gospel singer. He was a Nebraska resident whose legal case became controversial due to coercive circumstances surrounding his confession. Court records and private investigator Roy Stevens hired by Jill Cutshall's mother, played a central role. Stevens was later found to have lied about a prior felony to obtain credentials. During the investigation, he took Phelps to wildlife area near Stanton, Nebraska, where clothing had been found, and pressured him with shovel, threats, and firearm. Under pressure, Phelps confessed and repeated statements on a videotape while associates were present, making the confession disputed. Despite the confession, authorities initially did not arrest him immediately. Jill Cutshall's mother then used a rarely invoked Nebraska legal mechanism to petition for a county grand jury investigation, which ultimately led to Phelps's indictment. In 1992, the Nebraska Supreme Court unanimously upheld the conviction, ruling that the televised confession was admissible despite arguments that it had been coerced by what the court described as a would-be private investigator. Over the decades, the convicted David Phelps repeatedly attempted to overturn the conviction. In 2007, he sought DNA testing on evidence connected to the case but failed to secure relief. In 2012, a diary surfaced during another Nebraska murder investigation, allegedly describing the torture and deaths of multiple victims, including someone identified as Jill D. Defense efforts attempted to use the diary to reopen the case, but Nebraska courts later ruled the diary fraudulent. Then came another major legal development in 2023. The Nebraska State Board of Pardons rejected a request from Phelps seeking commutation of his life sentence. He argued that there was not one piece of evidence proving my guilt beyond the contested confession, and maintained that he had been threatened into confessing. Nebraska Attorney General Doug Peterson moved to reject the request. The board voted 3-0 against granting relief. The decision effectively closed another avenue for release after more than 3 decades in prison. None of this, however, was connected to gospel singer David Phelps. Yet online, the distinction is often lost as search engines, AI summaries, and clickbait videos merge identities because of a shared name. Once combined, misleading narratives spread quickly due to emotional reactions and high engagement in faith-based media spaces. Audiences often react before verification occurs, allowing false information to circulate widely online, unnecessarily, rapidly. In reality, the factual record is clear. All of these attempts to connect David Phelps to controversy are plain misinformation. The gospel singer has had a clean, scandal-free career, and he is committed to his faith and craft even to this day. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.